Shepherd's pie is one of Britain's most iconic dishes, but very few people are cooking it correctly. We're recreating Michelin legend Heston Blumenthal's version from his 1 Michelin star pub, the Hind's Head, and showing you how to turn a humble classic into something truly exceptional. Lamb shank. This is Heston's secret weapon to put an interesting twist on a classic British dish. The first point we'll have to navigate is, what is the difference between shepherd's pie and cottage pie? Well, a cottage pie is made with beef, and a shepherd's pie, as I'm sure you can imagine, is made with lamb. So my glamorous assistant, Chef Murray, made a cottage pie recently, and the general feedback was very positive. So we thought we would share an amazing recipe inspired by Heston Blumenthal, our former boss. It's the dish that every Englishman has had copious times through their life. A real midweek classic. So we're here to show you with a few little tips and tricks, bit of inspiration from Heston, how you can really elevate this to be an immense dish. So the first thing we're going to take is our lamb shanks to add a bit more depth, a bit more collagen, a bit more attitude to this final dish. But for this dish, you can easily do this dish with just lamb mince. So we're just going to braise these shanks all over on all sides. It's just going to be a secondary meat that we're going to add in. The base is still going to be predominantly lamb mince. Heston doesn't usually brown his lamb shanks. When we tested out his recipes, we thought the sauce could have been a bit thicker and a bit more depth of flavour. So we've added the coating of the flour, and we've added the caramelisation as well. So because the flour will naturally thicken the stock a little bit as it cooks. I dare you, try and find a better smell than roasting lamb fat. Lamb shanks have got a nice crust on them. Then I'm going to just take these out, put them into our container, turn my pan off. I'm going to use this pan to make the rest of my shepherd's pie. I'm just going to cover it in stock, quite a lot of stock, where this stock is going to reduce down and it's going to form the basis of the sauce for our pie. We're just going to add a little rectangular cartouche, and never leave a cartouche behind. Just roll that one up, save it for another day. Vital, really important. Yeah, if you don't have a oven-proof dish, you can do this in any sort of pan with a lid. You could do it in a Pyrex dish, in a roasting tray. Cover it with some tin foil into the oven, 85 degrees for about 8 to 10 hours. So shanks are going in. So you could do this the night before and leave it in there overnight. Or you could equally put it in first thing in the morning. It's a nice quick job while you're having your frosties. And then go out for the day and then come back and make the ragu later on. Frosties are optional. So my lamb shanks are out the oven now. Whenever you're braising any meat, it's always better to leave it to cool in the liquid that it was cooked in. It goes the same when you're doing sort of anything like coq au vin or beef bourguignon or anything really. Because what happens is if you remove it from the stock while it's hot, it steams dry and the meat can become a little bit dry. If you leave it to cool in the stock, it almost cools down and reabsorbs the juice and becomes more moist. So they've got a beautiful color on them. The meat is soft, you can pull it away. So just going to leave those aside to cool down. And while that's going, we're going to get on with the rest of the pie meat. So we're going to start with a high heat. Not going to add any fat because the lamb mince, as you can see, is very fatty. That's going to go into our pan. And as it's colouring, we're just going to break it down. So a high heat, what we're looking to do here is cook out the moisture in the meat as quickly as possible so that the meat will then caramelise on the bottom of the pan. If you do it on a low heat, what will happen is the moisture will come out and the meat will start to boil. We want to evaporate the moisture as quickly as possible so the meat can then caramelise and you get a beautiful dark Maillard reaction. This is from Heston's book called Heston at Home, the base recipe that we're using here. So as that first stage of that mince, we really want to keep breaking it up. You can just push it down with the back of a spoon, just to break up the clumps of meat so we get a nice fine texture. And that way we can increase the surface area and maximise the amount of colour we can get on the lamb. But you can almost see that liquid starting to evaporate. We want to get rid of that as quickly as possible. And as the water starts to evaporate, we can then lower the heat slightly. So we're obviously going to cut the lamb shank in with the mince. If you didn't want to go through the stage of adding the shank, you can just do double the amount of lamb mince. So as you can see, the water evaporates, and then the mince almost like shallow fries in the rendered fat. Really got this lovely caramelization there. We're going to take it a little bit further. I really like a really rich, intense sauce when I'm having something like a shepherd's pie. Taking that extra 30 seconds to a minute to caramelize it a little bit further, it's going to make all the difference. Because once you infuse this into the sauce with the sweet vegetables, you're going to get a perfect result. Pour the lamb mince up to one side. I'm just going to scoop out the mince, place that into a container for later. We're going to use this lamb fat to sweat off all of our vegetables. I'm actually going to remove a little bit of that lamb fat because there's quite a lot rendered out there. You can save this. You can use it to finish your roast potatoes on a Sunday. It's really good. You can use it to sort of colour off any other vegetables you're sort of making. If you're roasting some broccoli or something on a midnight meal, you could just keep the lamb fat in the fridge and use it just to dress over the top, or you can just use it like you would use any oil, really. So the veg we're going to be using for the pie, we've got some carrot, we've got some shallot, and we have some celery. My arch nemesis, the celery. I absolutely hate cutting celery. If you couldn't get shallots or you had onions you wanted to use, the onion would be absolutely fine. I'm going to go like a fairly small brunoise, but it doesn't need to be perfect. So pan's on. So I'm just going to take my carrot, put that into the pan. What we're going to add here is 1 star anise. Now, adding the star anise is a bit of a trademark of Heston. Adding the star anise isn't about trying to make the dish have a spice flavour of star anise. Star anise has a compound in it called anethol. Scientifically, it was researched to increase the perception of savouriness when used in sautéing. So we're just going to leave it in there to sort of permeate through the vegetables and add that perception into the final sauce base. So we've gone in there with about two shallots. Then we're just going to mix up the veg together. If it needs more fat, I've obviously got that reserved lamb fat. I might just go in with a little bit more, just wanting to season all the way through the cooking process. Medium-low heat. Not looking to get a massive amount of colour on this. It's barely any, really, because if too much colour on the vegetables can give a little bitter note. So we're looking to extract the nice sweetness from the vegetables. So we've got a few mushrooms here. Carrot and the shallots have been cooking for about 10 minutes. Next, we're going to go in with our mushrooms. Now, we're not going to get a massive amount of colour on these mushrooms. We're just looking to sort of release the moisture and soak up that lamb fat flavour. And then we're going to go in with the celery as well. It's a natural glutamate, it just makes things... We're not looking to add this to taste celery. We're looking to add this to bring out the flavours of other things. While that's doing that, I'm going to remove my lamb shank. And then I'm going to take the cooking liquid, I'm just going to pass it through a chinois, and I'm going to set this off to reduce. I'm going to do this around the corner just because I haven't got much space around here. We're going to reduce that down by at least half until it coats the back of a spoon. So my veg is looking good. When I've added more vegetables, the mushrooms and celery, I've just turned the heat up slightly, just because it's going to release more liquid. We don't want the vegetables to then boil. We still want it to caramelise gently. So veg is now looking perfect. So as you can see, mushrooms are very lightly coloured, but they've released some of their liquid. They've soaked up that lamb fat and they've evaporated a lot of their moisture. So now we're just going to turn this down and we're going to add some red wine. Just going to make sure to agitate the bottom of the pan, release any of that caramelization on the bottom, and then just reduce that down to a nice syrupy consistency. So a couple of minutes away there, I reckon. The wine's basically reduced, so we're getting all that flavour but none of the acidity. Then we're just going to remove our vegetable into a dish, just set that aside, and it wouldn't be shepherd's pie without some frozen peas. So it's going to add that onto our vegetables. That will all get mixed through our finished sauce later on. Set that aside here. Now you might have seen most of the times we've done mash on this channel, we've always done the method where you put the potatoes into the oven and bake them. But for this dish, I like a slightly different type of mash. And by boiling it, you get slightly less flavour. Now you might think, why the hell are you showing me a method to make mash with less flavour? But it's about texture. And there's so much going on in that sauce, all that flavour we've developed, a rich sauce and all those delicate vegetables, that the topping is more of a vessel. It's just an accompaniment to that braise underneath. Just gonna dice up the potatoes, cover them in salted water, and then pop them on to boil. So I've got my potatoes. I've just given them a quick rinse under running cold water, pop them into a pan, and then I'm just gonna cover that with a generous sort of pinch of salt. So while my potatoes are sort of going on to boil there, to remove the meat from the bone, keeping all of the fat and all of that connective tissue, because we've cooked it for so long now, it's all just broken down. Next up, I'm gonna dice up my lamb shank. So we're just gonna take that lamb shank and just dice it up into small chunks. Just gonna cut through it one way, and then just go back through it. I don't want it to be shredded, but I want it to be not a million miles away from the same size as the mince. It's sort of a ½ centimetre dice. This has been reducing for about 30 minutes. Now it's nice and thick and glossy. Similar consistency to like a finished reduced sauce. Okay, so we're just gonna drop the rosemary into the sauce and leave it to infuse. So if you've been following our channel for a while, you would have noticed in a lot of our cooking, we like to use something called a gastrique. We're gonna be making a mint gastrique. And what it does is it helps to balance sauces and dressings and other things, but you get the acidity and then you get the sweetness as well. So you get a sweet acidity that really helps to bring things to life. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the vinegar into a small pan, going to add the sugar, bring that up to a boil, and I'm just gonna take my mint and just like very roughly chop it. Then I'm gonna put my mint into a little container and then just pour it over the mint. What this is going to do is it's going to retain that flavour of the mint. And rather than like sort of cooking it and stewing it, you get a bit much more of a fresh mint flavour with the sweetness and the acidity from the Gastrique. If you haven't cooked with Gastriques before, I would highly recommend it. It's one of those things you can just make and just have it on hand all the time. But a little splash into a braised dish or into a dressing or over some fresh vegetables, it can really bring it to life. Obviously, mint, lamb goes together perfectly. That's going to be a great addition to our finished sauce. Pass these off through a colander or a strainer. Now, most importantly, we're going to leave these to steam dry because right now they're quite wet. So by letting them steam dry, they're going to release all of that last little bit of water. You get a nice light, fluffy mash rather than a sort of wet, stodgy one. So next we're going to mix together all of our filling. So we're going to add our vegetables and all the wine, our browned off mince and our lamb shank. Then we're going to take our sauce and just remove that rosemary. So that rosemary's been infusing there for about 20 minutes. I'm going to take a little bit of that sauce and just put it aside, just because I think I might have a little bit too much. And I'm going to add all of my lamb filling into the saucepan and then just gently warm that through and mix it with all the sauce. And then you can just add a little bit more of that stock as and when it needs it. Add a touch more. Good couple of hits of black pepper. So depending on how thick your sauce is, if you're a little bit worried about the thickness of your stock, or you don't like the stock too intense in flavour, you can reduce it less and potentially thicken it with a corn flour slurry. That is something that's in the original Heston recipe. You just take a little bit of the stock out, add a touch of corn flour, make a small slurry, and then you can add it back into the sauce to thicken it. So I'm going to leave that ticking over on a low heat just to warm through. I'm not going to taste it until the sauce is warmed, otherwise I won't get a correct sort of flavour profile. So next we're going to move on to the potato. So I'm going to take a pan, put it on a low heat. I'm going to add some butter and some milk. I'm just going to melt that down nicely. A little bit of salt in the milk butter as well. And then we're just going to place our potatoes into our ricer. Just rice our potato in like so. If you didn't have a ricer, you could use a conventional masher. We get a very similar result, just sometimes not quite as smooth. Okay, then we're just going to bring that potato with the butter and the milk together. You can add as little or as much butter as you want. Obviously, the more butter you're going to get, the more flavour you're going to get, but it can get quite fatty and greasy. And when you bake that mash, it can then sometimes start to split out. So I'm going to go for a version which doesn't have too much butter in, but you can just add that by taste. So a nice bit of salt. Then I'm going to add some of our mint Gastrique into the sauce to finish it. Again, you're using this as a seasoning. You can go with as little, as much as you want. But the best way, like with many things when you're seasoning, is just add a little bit, give it a taste, and then you can always add some more if it needs it. So one thing you've got to remember to do, which I actually nearly forgot, move the star anise. Give that a smell. Smell it, smell it. See? Good old Heston. To the mash, last thing, we're going to add some whole grain mustard. So whole grain mustard has a compound in it which wakens up the palate by a process called chemothesis. So Heston adds it to the mash for that reason. I'm just going to add a touch of milk because the mash is getting a little bit thick. So the whole grain mustard's in there. It's going to give that final little warm through, and then we're basically ready to build our pie. Okay, so we're going to give that mix one final mix, pour that into our oven-proof dish, and we're just going to level out our meat. Level it up. So to get the right ratios on here, I'm going to split the mash in the pan into 2 halves, and then split that again into quarters, and just roughly place your 4 quarters onto your 4 quarters of your dish, evenly distribute it. But there's nothing worse than doing half your tray and then realizing that you've got extra mash left, or vice versa, you haven't got enough mash left. Then I'm just going to take my spatula, shape it out across the whole thing. There's no real trick to doing this, just want to roughly do it as best you can, even as you can. And with the back of the fork, I'm just going to make little lines across the top. Now the lines aren't really for decoration, you're actually trying to create some waves and bumps in the top of the mash. A little bit more surface area to get a little bit more texture on the finished product. A little sprinkling of sea salt just over the top. Again, just adds a nice little bit of texture, a little bit of crunch. And for one final little umami kick, just going to give a little grating of Parmesan just over the top. This is not Heston approved, but it just feels right. I reckon that'll take about 25-30 minutes. 180. So there we have it. Shepherd's pie in all its glory. So this is taking about 25-30 minutes, 180 degrees centigrade. Oh, nice little crust from the Parmesan on top. Very meat heavy. Sweet, acidic, really well balanced. A delicious, delicious dish.